It is known that the folklore of any nation has its roots in the history of that nation. For instance, an old English legend could not possibly sing the praises of a Chinese emperor and claim him to be an ancestor of the English people, or describe in detail a Turkish custom and maintain that it's an English custom, etc. Hence, the many examples of Macedonian folklore that describe or glorify the ancient Macedonians or elements related to their material or cultural existence cannot be understood in any other way than as the cultural heritage of the ancient Macedonians. This constitutes undeniable and irrefutable evidence that the ancient Macedonians are, in the largest part, ancestors of the present-day Macedonian nation. Here we will review some elements of Macedonian folklore, recorded chiefly in the 19th and 20th centuries, which were present also in the culture of the ancient Macedonians. Folk songs and tales that glorify famous persons from ancient Macedonian history were recorded by almost all collectors and catalogers of Macedonian folklore from the middle of the 19th century. This lore was also noticed by foreigners who visited Macedonia. Byzantine historian and writer Nicephorus Grigoras described some of the folk songs he heard in Strumica during his visit here in 1326. He stated that the folk songs from Strumica reminded him very much of the Phrygian songs. It is known that the Phrygians, or Brygians, had a vital role in the ethnogenesis of the ancient Macedonians, and it is therefore evident that the Macedonians in the 14th century still nourished their heritage in their folk songs. Much later, French Baron François de Thot, who was working in Constantinople in the end of the 18th century, in his recollections, wrote,
22 Macedonians, each with a rifle slung over the shoulder, came here and gathered in a tavern and sang a song about the triumphs of Alexander the Great.
Russian traveler and chronicler Viktor Grigorovich also left a record about how the memory of Alexander the Great of Macedon remained with the Macedonians for the first half of the 19th century. Concerning his impressions from the visit to Macedonia in 1844, he wrote,
In all the areas I visited, I have not heard other names but the names of Alexander the Great and King Marco. Still the memory of Alexander the Great is the more established among the people.
Viktor Grigorovich recorded one folk tale about the Macedonian Emperor Philip II. The Bosnian collector and recorder of Macedonian folklore and customs, Stefan Verković, who stayed in Macedonia several years in the middle of the 19th century, admitted that he was very surprised when he discovered folk songs in Macedonia dedicated to persons from ancient Macedonia. He even declared these songs to be his chief discovery. In one of his letters, Verković pointed out,
This extremely important and unexpected discovery occurred in the first quarter of 1865. It was a little song about Alexander the Great, the Macedonian emperor. By the end of the year I found another 2 songs about him. The next year, 1866, I came across an even older item, a song about Orpheus.
Stefan Verković also left other records of Macedonian folklore with ancient Macedonian elements. He noted that a large number of such narratives, passed down from generation to generation, were found among the extended Macedonian Mavratsi family, residents of the present-day Pirin part of Macedonia. He wrote,
"The Marvaci live in the Neverkop district, which is between the Kremen and Mominakula mountain and offers panoramic scenes between Neverkop and Razlog. The Marvacis have tales and folklore passed on down through the generation from the very distant past. They also relate a song about Alexander the Great and his horse Bucephalus, about his crusade in Asia and his war against Darius and Porus, the Indian emperor. This song is a very important source concerning the origin of the ancient Macedonian, Thracians and Illyrians. It was told by the shepherd Stoyan of Charov."
This folklorist also recorded that in the southwestern part of Macedonia, the people declared themselves to be pure Macedonians, descendants of Alexander the Great. Stefan Verković published another song about Alexander the Great of Macedon, sang to him by the blind folk singer Jovan Mihailov. The song was recorded sometime prior to 1862, and it existed in two variants. The song also alludes to battles that Alexander fought and continues by telling how Alexander found a spring of live water. Still, the most interesting part is the end of the song, which describes Alexander's death.
"Again walks Alexander. Again he walks 3 days and 3 nights. Chased he is by mosquitoes. They haunt him and gave him no sleep. Bread he does not eat for 3 days, leaving for a particular field. There he found the craftsmen cutting stone in the field. Stone they cut for a trough. Then said Alexander, 'There is no salvation, brother craftsman, no salvation from the mosquitoes. Let me lay down in that stone trough. Perhaps I can hide from those flies, from those mosquitoes.' Then he lay down in the stone trough. But the mosquitoes entered it still. From the one ear they came in, from the other they came out. There he died, Alexander, in the stone trough from the mosquitoes."
Most of the historians researching the reasons for Alexander's death believe that he died from malaria. That is precisely what is described in this song. Clearly, malaria has been recognized as a disease transmitted by mosquitoes who haunt him and give him no sleep. It was not by accident that Alexander complained about the mosquitoes, realizing that they were the reason for his death. It is hard to believe that the blind and illiterate Macedonian singer Jovan Mihailov, from whom this song was heard and recorded in the 19th century, could know the details about Alexander's death caused by mosquitoes. The details regarding Alexander's death from malaria were scientifically supported with arguments for the first time in 1978 by the historian Donald Angels, who presented this theory in his work A Note on Alexander's Death. Later, this theory gained increased support, and it can be said that today this theory is considered accepted by most historians. Thus, the verses from this Macedonian song, "There he died, Alexander, in the stone threw from mosquitoes," are even more amazing. The medical knowledge of the Macedonian folk author is also amazing. Mosquitoes as a reason, i.e. transmitters of malaria. The first to discover that mosquitoes transmit malaria was the British researcher Ronald Ross. But he made this discovery in 1898, several decades after this old Macedonian folk song was recorded. Ross received the Nobel Prize for this discovery in 1902, but in the Macedonian song, the mosquitoes are precisely the reason for the death of Alexander of Macedon. This indeed is a mystery that needs to be researched. We can see that the song also mentions the sarcophagus, the stone through that was made by the craftsman, in which Alexander was buried. This can be another proof that portions of this song remained in the Macedonian folklore of the 19th century from the ancient period. The truth that the mosquitoes were associated with the death of Alexander was simply passed down from generation to generation among the Macedonians, and that way it reached the time of the blind singer Mihailov, who conveyed this factual information through the song. Kuzman Shapkarev and Marko Tsepenkov, collectors and recorders of Macedonian folklore from the 19th century, also wrote about the representation of Alexander the Great of Macedon in Macedonian folklore. Kuzman Shapkarev wrote,
"My late father, during our childhood, was telling us many tales, some of them about King Marko and about Tsar Alexander, Alexander the Great."
Knowledge of one Macedonian folk song dedicated to Alexander of Macedon is found in the folklore collection of the Aegean Macedonian Dimitropop Dimitrov, who was collecting Macedonian folk tales for years in many towns and villages in Aegean Macedonia. One of the tales he recorded is the song about Tsar Alexander of Macedon, sung to him by the 84-year-old Tanas Markov. The following is an excerpt from the song.
Stand up, Alexander of Macedon, to see how your sons fight for Macedonia."
The song was very long and lasted about 15 minutes. French slavist Cyprien Robert recorded one song about Alexander of Macedon, in which he appealed to the gods to watch over his people glorious and with courageous hearts. This oath was published in original in French in 1852. A song naming the ancient Macedonian Tsar Caranus was published in the Anthology of Macedonian and Bulgarian Folk and Art Songs from 1908 to 1910. The first verses of the song read,
"Old mountain, who will lead the armies in thee without the proud Tsar, Tsar Caranus?"
A Macedonian folk song about Tsar Caranus was also mentioned by the Macedonian activist Isaia Majovski in his Memories, published in Sofia in 1922. The Macedonian newspaper Narodna Volja, Blagoevgrad, July 1994, published a Macedonian folk tale about Tsar Perseus, entitled Father's Curse. This tale from the Pirin region of Macedonia in many details corresponds to the historical truth. Other than these, there are many other songs and tales with an ancient Macedonian content, published in the book The Descendants of the Ancient Macedonians by Aleksandar DONSKI. Now we will discuss several legends that contain ancient Macedonian elements that were recorded in the 19th and 20th centuries. The legend Alexander the Great invented war was published in the Anthology of Folklore by the Macedonian teacher Kuzman Shapkarev in Sofia in 1891. It reads,
"The simple people believe that war was first invented by Alexander the Great of Macedon, when he was traveling the seas, going to another unknown world to find and ladle immortal water, to drink it and never die. When he saw the fish in the sea fighting as in a war, he thought of doing the same, and when he came to his empire, he first invented war in this world."
Traveler and chronicler Pierre Bellon visited Macedonia in the 16th century. In his chronicles, he wrote that according to a legend among the people living near Philippi, the stable and manager of the horse Bucephalus were in Philippi. Several legends about Aleksander of Macedon were recorded by the Institute for Folklore in Skopje. One of them, recorded in 1971, was told by Stanimir Višinski, born in the village of Misimer, Aegean Macedonia, in 1885. In a legend told by Mrs. Loza Kamčevska from Prilep, Aleksander of Macedon defeated Darius in a bet concerning who could eat more Macedonian hot peppers. Darius was not able to eat as many as Alexander and had to hand over his empire. Marko Cepenkov also recorded a legend that mentioned Alexander of Macedon. In the legend about the old city of Gradište, Cepenkov wrote,
"It is said that this ruined city was built by Alexander the Macedonian Tsar."
A legend about Alexander of Macedon is the first to appear in the chapter Thales in the Miladinov Brothers anthology entitled as Tsar Alexander. French Slavist André Masson, in his anthology Slavic Tales from Southwestern Macedonia, published in Paris in 1923, published a legend narrated by an older man named Jovan from the village of Nevoljani in Aegean Macedonia, which contains a fantastic combination of Alexander of Macedon, a medieval king Marko, and a hero called Jankula. The legend of Alexander of Macedon, narrated by Nikola Andonov, born in 1883, from the village of Konopiste, was published in Macedonian People's Legend by a Macedonian folklorist Tanas Vržinovski. This extended legend describes the relationship between Alexander of Macedon and the Persian ruler Darius, beginning with Alexander's childhood until his marriage to the daughter of Darius. The legend of Alexander of Macedon and his sister Angelina is very interesting, because the folk author has created a fantastic combination with this famous Macedonian ruler and the young woman Angelina, a Macedonian mythical girl from the medieval period. The legend was narrated by Petre Andreevski, born in 1893, from the village of Modrišta, and is recorded by a Macedonian folklorist Tanas Vržinovski. There is a legend about Alexander of Macedon, narrated by Apostol Apostolov, born in 1912, from the Macedonian town Kriva Palanka. The legend is also published by Tanas Vržinovski. In this legend, Alexander of Macedon, as protector of the Macedonians, is fighting against the Turkish Sultan Murat. This legend indicates that the Macedonians considered Alexander of Macedon to be their ancestor and protector in the period of the Turkish occupation as well. In the same context, we will mention the legend of the history of Macedonia, in which a certain Novko from Debar left to search for that history. Novko went to one monastery and asked the archbishops and the priests,
"Listen up, you archbishops and priests. Will you tell me where is the history of Macedonia?"
One of the priests replied,
"Yes, we will tell you. The history of Macedonia is in a secret place. On a secret day, the history is opened and read. 3 times a year, the history is read."
Novko went in search of the secret monastery. When he found it, they indeed showed him the history of Macedonia, which was written on rabbit skin and with a feather of an eagle. The town of Bitola was also known by the name Monastir. The renowned Turkish traveler and chronicler Evliya Çelebi, around half of the 17th century, wrote about the ancient Macedonian origin of the name Monastir.
They say that here, in the time of Alexander the Great, there was a large temple, which is the reason why the place was named Monastir.
Ancient Macedonian rulers were also mentioned in the legend Ivan Mountain and Progon, which is still told among the Macedonians in the part of Macedonia under Albania, near present-day Lake Prespa. This legend was recorded by Dr. Zoran RISTEVSKI in his book Prespa under Albania, published in 1993. The legend mentions certain ancient Macedonian prince. Following the legend about Alexander of Macedon in the Miladinus anthology in the 19th century, there is a legend about Emperor Justinian, who was a Roman emperor who was born in Macedonia. This legend concerns the name of the Macedonian town of Ohrid, and according to this, Justinian spoke the language of the present-day Macedonians. Another Macedonian legend about Justinian, as well as his army leader Belisarius, is found in the collection of folklore, science and literature, published in Sofia in 1889. It is related to the founding of the Macedonian villages Istok and German. The village Istok was named after Justinian's father Istok, again linking Justinian with the Macedonian heritage. Istok means east. The village German in this legend is described as the birthplace of Belisarius, Justinian's renowned military leader. A certain number of motifs and characters in Macedonian folklore are of ancient Macedonian origin. We will mention some of them as we continue. The lion is found in many Macedonian folk tales, especially in tales about animals and in fables, recorded in the 19th and 20th centuries. How did the lion come into Macedonian folk tales? If the appearance of the lion is located exclusively in the so-called Slavic period, then we need to answer how the medieval ancestors of present-day Macedonians, who would have then had almost absolutely no contact with the lion, began creating tales about an animal that most of the Macedonians of that period would have never even seen. The answer to this question does not have to be complicated. It is known that lions indeed lived in Macedonia, but that was in the period of ancient Macedonia, and certainly before that. Confirmation of the presence of lions in Macedonia in the ancient period is found in the work of Herodotus. He mentioned lions in relation to the Persian penetration into Macedonia during the war with the Hellenic city-states. During their passage through Macedonia, the Persian army had difficulties with the lions attacking their camels during the night. The lion is also found on many ancient Macedonian coins from the period of Alexander I in the 5th century BC and onward. It was, therefore, the presence of lions in ancient Macedonia that inspired the ancient Macedonian folk author to immortalize them through tales. As the tales were passed down from generation to generation, they reached present generations, although lions are long extinct in Macedonia. Marko Cepenkov, in the middle of the 19th century, recorded several tales about the lion, the cat and the kitten, the lion and the man, and the lion that transported the woodcutters' donkeys over the river. The lion from ancient Macedonia remains in more than just Macedonian tales. It has also left a significant mark in heraldry. The lion was also a symbol in the Macedonian liberation movements. It was present on the flags of the Razlog and Illidan uprising, and even appeared as a Macedonian symbol during World War II. The lion is also depicted on many ornaments in Macedonian churches and other buildings. The lynx is another animal present in Macedonian folktales, most likely originating from the ancient period. According to Herodotus, the lynx was a widespread animal in ancient Macedonia, but today it is almost extinct, with rare exceptions in inaccessible mountain regions. Its presence as an emblem of the ancient Macedonian tribe of the Lyncests, who lived in southwestern Macedonia, is one evidence of the widespread presence of the lynx in the ancient period. Lyncests are known in history as the Macedonian tribe of the lynx, and information about them is found as early as the work of Thucydides and Strabo. It is also found in Macedonian folk tales from the 19th century, such as the tale "The Lucky One Who Became a Tsar", recorded by Marko Cepenkov. The characters in this tale are the bear, the lion, and the lynx. The mixing of influences from different historical periods is evident in this tale. Apart from the ancient Macedonian elements, there are also elements from the period of the Turkish rule in Macedonia, as well as elements of the Christian culture. The occurrence of the character of the philosopher in Macedonian tales is fascinating. Considering that the philosopher had a particularly important role in the ancient period, it is very likely that his presence in the Macedonian folk tales recorded in the 19th and 20th centuries also originates in the ancient Macedonian folklore. There are several tales published in the 19th century from Marko Cepenkov: The Philosopher and the Doctor, The Tsar, the Philosopher and the Barber, and The Tsar and the Philosopher. The titles and the contents of the tales mentioned here, especially the character of the Tsar appearing together with the philosopher, strongly suggest the ancient origins of these characters. In the 19th century, Kuzma Shapkarev also recorded a tale about the philosopher in a role of close association with the Tsar. Herodotus, the father of history, wrote the tale about the three brothers who were exiled and prosecuted by some Tsar. The youngest one, Perdiccas, was the most clever of the brothers, and thanks to him, the three brothers managed to save themselves from the dishonorable Tsar. They later founded the Macedonian state. This motif of three brothers, with an emphasis of the youngest brother in the story, is clearly recognized and is one of the most common motifs in the Macedonian folk tales. Many tales are dedicated precisely to three brothers, the youngest always being the brightest and most courageous, resolving the problem that the other two brothers could not, the same as in the tale by Herodotus. This conformity cannot be entirely coincidence. Therefore, it is quite likely that the figure of the youngest brother in Macedonian folk tales originates in ancient Macedonian times and has retained its basic character in its entirety. Ancient historian Justin passed along a legend about the capture of the Macedonian city, later named Aigai, by the Macedonian Emperor Caranus. According to Justin's legend, Caranus gathered his armies and came to Macedonia, determined to capture an important city. He accomplished this by using a flock of goats. On a foggy day, he managed to inconspicuously enter the city, following the goats that knew the way to the city. Thereafter, during his campaign, a flock of goats always walked in front of Caranus' army. The Miladinov brothers, collectors and compilers of folk tales from the 19th century, in the chapter Legends recorded the following story about the founding of the city Vodin, or Edessa.
Vodin, a city where Macedonian Tsars were buried. Naturally fortified, it is said that it was captured during a war by the enemy after a long siege. With the help of goats leading them along a secret trail which they habitually traveled, over which the enemy was able to enter the stronghold.
Any further comments concerning the astonishing similarity between Justin's tale and this legend recorded in the 19th century is unnecessary. Attempts to explain this as the creation of Macedonian men and women from the 19th century, chiefly illiterate, due to their familiarity with Justin's work, is absurd. Such an attempt would make no sense, because there is no other explanation than that this legend from the ancient period was preserved in the present-day Macedonian generation as a direct cultural heritage from antiquity. The work of the historian Justin has not been published yet in the Republic of Macedonia, let alone during the dark ages of Turkish rule in the Balkans of the 19th century. This motif is found in a tale recorded in the 19th century by Marko Cepenkov. The title of the tale is "The Tsar That Had a Horn on His Head." There are images of Alexander the Great of Macedon, depicting him with two small horns on his head. He was remembered as such in the Islamic tradition. It is believed by many that he is mentioned in the Holy Book of Islam, the Quran, under the descriptive name Zulkarnain, meaning the one with the two horns. German historian Ulrich Wilkman wrote that this determination of Alexander originates from the old Egyptian legend, whereby he is represented as a son of Ammon. The son of Ammon was always depicted on images with two small horns on his head. Wilken believes that this was the origin of the descriptive name of Alexander as the one with two horns, which was also transferred to folklore. The motif of killing old men is found in the tale entitled "Old People Were Taken to the Mountain to Die," recorded in the 19th century by Marko Cepenkov. Russian researcher Kostykhin reports a belief preserved in Tajiki and Georgian tales and people's collective memory of how the custom of killing old people was discontinued by Alexander the Great of Macedon after he conquered these regions. There is also a Macedonian folk song about Alexander of Macedon, which describes how Alexander put an end to this ancient and cruel custom. Therefore, the origin of this motif from present-day Macedonian folklore is certainly of ancient Macedonian origin. The ancient Macedonian heritage in present-day Macedonian folk dances is little researched. American researcher Stoyan Pribicevic, in his book Macedonia, Its People and History, conveyed his observations on this subject. On the history of Macedonian folk dances, the book states,
"The Macedonian dances belong among the oldest recorded dances in the world. One of these dances is the Teshkoto. Now it is called a shepherd's dance, of a nimble leaps from rock to rock, watching for possible beast or bandit. Actually, it is an archaic Macedonian dance from pre-Slav times, dramatizing the difficult life of the Macedonians, recalling border warfare and raids, the unending battle to defend the flocks, the land, the tribe. There are also ancient Macedonian dances performed to the beat of drums only. And there are silent dances with no instruments or singing whatsoever, no hand clapping at all. According to some musicologists, there is so much archaism in Macedonian music, as well as in costumes, dances, customs, for the reason that this region has lived so long in servitude which precluded foreign influences.